Today, we're talking about older games, but not that old. And let's be honest, a lot of classics haven't aged very well, but the games on this list are different. They've stood the test of time and are still just as fun to play today as they were at launch. These are games from 10 to 15 years ago that still outperform many titles released today. So stick around until the end, you might be surprised.
I have to admit, I was one of those people who tried playing this game twice before I finally fell in love with it. Both times I ended up quitting because something just didn't click. And I've never been the type to follow the crowd, so even though everyone kept saying it was amazing, I simply walked away from it. Then one day I decided to give it one last shot. I slowed down, stopped rushing, and really let myself experience the game. That's when I finally understood why it gets so much praise. The storytelling is incredible. The side quests are thoughtfully crafted and feel like a natural part of the main narrative, instead of just filler content. Everything has a purpose. On top of that, The Witcher's open world is so immersive that your choices genuinely feel like they matter. Anyone who's actually played it knows exactly what I'm talking about. And if you've never really given this game a fair chance, just like I hadn't for a long time, you owe it to yourself to do it. Playing The Witcher is a one-of-a-kind experience.
Now let's talk about a game that takes storytelling and character development to another level, The Last of Us Part 1. Very few games can make you feel the weight of their story the way this one does. The narrative is so powerful and emotionally driven that instead of simply watching the events unfold, you genuinely feel like you're living through them. Joel Miller is one of the most deeply written characters in gaming history. He's defined by loss, trauma, and emotional scars, and you can feel that weight in everything he does. What's even more impressive is how those traits carry over into the gameplay. Joel moves with purpose. Every punch feels heavy, and every fight feels desperate, reinforcing his personality through the way you play. The combat, whether against human enemies or the infected, is incredibly intense and grounded. Limited resources, the need to improvise, and stealth mechanics make every encounter tense and unpredictable. Everything works together to create an unmatched level of immersion. Widely regarded as one of the greatest video games ever made, The Last of Us Part 1 delivers one of the most unforgettable single-player experiences a gamer can have. Even if the story doesn't completely resonate with you, it's impossible to ignore the quality of the writing, the direction, and the character development. It's the kind of game that hooks you from beginning to end while perfectly setting the stage for The Last of Us Part 2. But this game isn't carried by its story alone. Its gameplay is still outstanding, balancing exploration, combat, stealth, and moments of pure tension. There's a reason The Last of Us shows up on almost every list of the greatest single-player games ever made, and honestly, the only way to truly understand why is to play it yourself.
Now we're getting to what might be the most underrated game on this entire list, Mad Max. A big part of that comes down to its unfortunate release. It launched just one day after Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain, so naturally all the attention was focused on Metal Gear. Because of that, a lot of people overlooked a game that absolutely nails its post-apocalyptic atmosphere. The desert wasteland of Mad Max is incredibly well crafted, constantly giving you the feeling that every resource matters and survival is never guaranteed. The hand-to-hand combat, clearly inspired by the Batman Arkham series, is smooth, impactful, and incredibly satisfying. It's true that clearing enemy camps can become a bit repetitive, but in my opinion, that doesn't take away from how enjoyable the overall experience is. Where the game truly shines is its vehicle combat. Building and upgrading the magnum opus, then taking it into explosive chases and high-speed battles across the wasteland is easily the highlight of the game. The story is solid and does its job, but the real focus is on the action and the freedom of exploring this harsh world. More than once, the vehicle battles reminded me of classics like Vigilante 8 and Twisted Metal. Mad Max is one of those games that every gamer should experience at least once. The only way to understand why it's so often called one of the most overlooked games of its generation is to play it for yourself.
What is this place?
I had to include this game on the list because of everything it represents, and because it has aged incredibly well. I'm talking about the original Resident Evil remake, which was later remastered in 2015. Even today, it's still a masterclass in how to remake a classic game. In another video, I talked about how Resident Evil 2 Remake managed to surpass the original, but the first Resident Evil remake is every bit as impressive. Returning to the Spencer Mansion as Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield with beautifully updated visuals is an unforgettable experience, especially if you've been a fan of the series for years. What impresses me the most is how faithfully it preserves the spirit of the original. The backtracking, survival horror, resource management, puzzles, and constant tension are all still there. But it also expands on the original by adding meaningful new content and improving parts of the story without ever losing what made the game special. The separate Jill and Chris campaigns add plenty of replay value, giving you a great reason to experience the game more than once. And since it's almost always on sale for just a few dollars, there's really no excuse not to play it. Trust me, even today, this game outshines a lot of modern releases.
Everyone talks about Red Dead Redemption 2, but a lot of people forget just how incredible the original Red Dead Redemption really is. What this game accomplished in its generation was nothing short of remarkable. Long before its sequel raised the bar even higher, the first Red Dead Redemption had already delivered one of the greatest open-world experiences of its time. The story was far ahead of its time, and John Marston remains one of the most charismatic protagonists in gaming. As you progress through the campaign, you begin to understand his motivations, his inner conflicts, and you become completely invested in his journey. For its time, the visuals were outstanding, the gameplay was excellent, and its open world, inspired by the American Old West, was incredibly detailed and full of life. Exploring its towns, deserts, and vast landscapes was an unforgettable experience, and the game struck a perfect balance between action, exploration, and storytelling. Unfortunately, a lot of people overlook this game simply because its sequel reached an almost unbelievable level of quality. But that doesn't take anything away from the original. If anything, it proves just how strong this franchise has always been. If you've played Red Dead Redemption 2 but never experienced the original, you're missing a huge part of what makes this series so special. This is, without a doubt, one of those games that every gamer should play at least once in their lifetime. Far Cry 3 absolutely had to be on this list. I know a lot of people consider it the best game in the franchise, and honestly, I completely understand why. This is the game that defined the modern Far Cry formula, and went on to influence countless open-world games that followed. The first thing that stands out is the atmosphere. The island is beautiful, but at the same time, it constantly makes you feel like you're in danger. You never truly feel safe, and that's a huge part of what makes the experience so engaging. The gameplay is also fantastic. The game gives you complete freedom to approach every encounter however you want, whether that's sneaking through enemy camps one by one or going in guns blazing. The progression system is another major highlight. As you move through the game, you unlock new skills, become stronger, and genuinely feel like your character is growing alongside the journey. That constant sense of progression makes every hour feel rewarding. The story is another one of the game's greatest strengths. It keeps you invested from beginning to end, and the cast of characters is incredibly memorable. It's the kind of game that always leaves you wanting to see what happens next. And of course, you can't talk about Far Cry 3 without mentioning Vaz. Even after all these years, he's still considered one of the greatest video game villains of all time. Despite not having as much screen time as people remember, his performance left such a lasting impression that he became one of gaming's most iconic characters. If you've never played Far Cry 3, you're missing one of the greatest open-world games ever made. Even more than a decade later, it's still an incredibly fun experience, and a perfect example of why so many people still consider it the best Far Cry game ever. Rise of the Tomb Raider absolutely deserves a spot on this list. In my opinion, it took everything that worked in the reboot and made it even better. It's one of those games that does almost everything right and is very hard not to enjoy if you're a fan of action-adventure games.
The gameplay is incredibly fun. Exploring massive environments, discovering hidden paths, and uncovering secrets around every corner is a huge part of the experience. The game constantly encourages you to step off the main path, and it rewards your curiosity, making exploration feel genuinely satisfying. The story is another strong point. Lara Croft continues to grow as a character, becoming more confident and experienced throughout her journey. Watching that evolution unfold is one of the most rewarding parts of the game, as you see her gradually become the iconic adventurer everyone knows. Combat is another area where the game shines. It gives you the freedom to approach encounters however you like, whether you prefer stealth or taking enemies head-on. That flexibility keeps every fight engaging and prevents the gameplay from ever feeling repetitive. Visually, the game still looks fantastic today. The environments are beautiful, varied, and filled with detail, creating a real sense of adventure. It's the kind of game where you'll often stop for a moment just to take in the scenery before moving on. If you enjoy action-adventure games with exploration, puzzles, satisfying combat, and a well-developed protagonist, Rise of the Tomb Raider is an easy recommendation. Even years after its release, it remains one of the best single-player adventures you can experience.
Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor is one of those games that I think every fan of action and open-world games should play at least once. It didn't launch with a ton of hype, but it introduced one of the most creative gameplay systems I've ever seen, making every playthrough feel unique. The gameplay is incredibly fun. Combat is fast, fluid, and extremely satisfying, taking clear inspiration from the Batman Arkham series while still feeling like its own thing. As you progress, you unlock new abilities and naturally begin combining melee combat, stealth, and supernatural powers in ways that make every encounter more exciting. But the game's biggest strength is the Nemesis system. Your enemies remember you, grow stronger over time, and react to everything that happens throughout your journey. Because of that, every player ends up creating their own unique stories. It's such a brilliant mechanic that even years later, very few games have managed to deliver anything comparable. The story also does a great job of expanding the world of Middle-earth without relying solely on the movies. Even if you're not a huge Lord of the Rings fan, the game stands on its own and offers an enjoyable adventure from beginning to end. The open world constantly encourages exploration, and the feeling of becoming more powerful while gradually taking control of enemy territories makes progression incredibly rewarding. It's one of those games where you tell yourself just one more mission, and before you know it, hours have gone by. If you've never played Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor, you're missing one of the most creative games of its generation. Even after all these years, it's still an incredibly fun experience, and a perfect reminder that great game design never gets old. GTA 5 is one of those games that really doesn't need an introduction. Even after all these years, it's still one of the most played and influential games in the industry, and that's no accident. The first thing that stands out is the scale and quality of its open world. Los Santos remains one of the most alive and believable cities ever created in a video game. Every neighborhood has its own personality, there's always something happening around you, and simply exploring the city never gets old. The gameplay is another reason this game has aged so well. You can focus entirely on the main story, spend hours exploring the world, take part in countless side activities, or just create your own fun. That level of freedom is what makes GTA 5 so special. The story deserves a lot of praise as well. Following 3 different protagonists turned out to be a brilliant idea. Michael, Franklin, and Trevor all have completely different personalities, and switching between them keeps the campaign fresh, unpredictable, and entertaining from beginning to end. The gunfights, high-speed chases, unforgettable missions, and huge variety of activities make it almost impossible for the game to feel repetitive. There's always something new to do, and that's one of the biggest reasons GTA 5 is still so relevant more than a decade after its release. If there's one game that defined the open world genre for an entire generation, it's GTA 5. Even after all these years, it's still a must-play for every gamer, and proof that some games simply never get old. The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim had to be the game to close out this list. Even after all these years, it's still considered one of the greatest RPGs ever made, and honestly, it's easy to see why. Very few games have given players the same level of freedom and immersion that Skyrim offers. The first thing that stands out is its world. Every city, every cave, every mountain, and every forest feels like it has something worth discovering. It's one of those games where you set out to complete a quest, get distracted by something else, and suddenly realize you've spent hours exploring without even noticing. The gameplay is another reason Skyrim has aged so well. It lets you create your own playstyle, whether you want to be a warrior, a stealthy assassin, a powerful mage, or a mix of everything. That freedom makes every playthrough feel different and gives the game incredible replay value. The story is also memorable, but what truly makes Skyrim special is everything happening outside the main quest. The side quests, the guilds, the characters, and the countless random encounters make the world feel alive in a way that very few games have managed to achieve. And of course, there's the atmosphere. The soundtrack, the breathtaking landscapes, and the sense of adventure come together to create an experience that's incredibly easy to get lost in. It's the kind of game that constantly encourages you to keep exploring because you never know what you'll find around the next corner. If you've somehow never played Skyrim, you're missing one of the most important RPGs ever made. More than a decade later, it still sets the standard for open-world role-playing games and remains one of the greatest single-player adventures you can experience. To me, these games are proof that true classics never really age. Time has passed and technology has evolved, but they're still just as fun and memorable as when they first released. If you haven't played some of them yet, I highly recommend giving them a chance. And of course, this is just my opinion. If you think I missed any games or would build this list differently, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear which classics you would include. See you in the next video.